Welcome back to the Fiffe Files. I'm your host, Michelle Fiffe, cartoonist, publisher, comic book enthusiast. We just got done. We wrapped up a 6-part video essay series here, looking at the work of Keith Giffen, another comic book creator who I've long admired, and I've loved his work since I was a child up to adulthood. And I figured I'd look at every single bit of drawing that he did. If he drew it, we looked at it and we talked about it and we mapped out his sort of his positioning in the field, in the industry, in the art form. And in doing so, and looking through all these comic books, primarily books it ranged from the 70s all the way to the aughts, to the teens, to the 20s. But in looking through this period of like the 80s, early 90s, I came across a bunch of other cartoonists who I've been obsessed with as well. And I figured as a sort of bonus episode to maybe go over some of their work. Maybe not as exhaustive as the Giffen stuff, but I have plenty of work to look at. And so I want to take a look at cartoonists such as Steve Lightle, Ernie Colón, and Cullins, all who worked sometimes in the same offices as Keith Giffen, sometimes in the same title, sometimes even in the same issue. They would share art chores. And so I want to start out with Blue Devil with Cullins. Now Cullins, to me, he's a DC guy. Most of these artists actually, in my eye, I see them as DC artists. And so his main claim to fame, if you could call it that, I mean, because he's worked on so many other projects, but I guess his starting point really was Blue Devil, which he designed with Gary Kahn and Dan Mishkin, the writer team, which was it's not that common to see writer teams, not back then at least. You didn't really see it too often. But anyway, he developed this comic book with them, and it's sort of their, I guess it's their response to grim and gritty, the trend of the grimness of comics around that time. We're talking about like 1984, 85, where things are getting super violent in mainstream comics. And this is sort of a callback to more fun comics, like very inspired by Steve Ditko's Spider-Man, which I believe this was offered to Steve Ditko first, but based on the name and somewhat the concept, which has touches of metaphysics, he wasn't interested. He passed, and it went to Cullins, a young Cullins. As you could see here, he's fully formed. He has a nice bouncy style. It's very clear in his storytelling. You see these chiseled faces with big eyes. You didn't really see that often in American comics. So it really stood apart even this early. The inker, I believe, was, I want to say, Pablo Marcos. He would go on to work with Gary Martin a lot. But Pablo Marcos was another mainstay inker at DC, did tons of work. And they're a nice blend. I mean, this first issue, it's kind of sort of it's the introduction to this character. I believe he appeared in a preview book elsewhere. Oh, by the way, he just as a little extra thing here, Cullins drew a bunch of DC trading cards. And so as you could see, that's Blue Beetle. And I'm just going to be kind of shuffling them off as we go, because he did tons of them. He did about like a fifth of the line. Like there's tons of cards, and he drew a lot of them in the 90s. We'll get to that eventually. Oh, by the way, this promo piece appeared in Comics Interview, Amazing Heroes, the Comics Journal. So this was getting a pretty good promotional push from DC. It's really nice to see the black and white art. I mean, you could see what I mean about his style. It's just so crisp and just fun. I guess, he was the perfect artist for this book. Not to say it was a humor book. It is pretty much just like a pretty direct superhero comic. It's just a fun superhero comic with new concepts, new villains. It interacts with the rest of the DC universe. See Gary Martin, he's already on board. Shockwave, who I recall seeing in Booster Gold. He's sort of a relatively new character at the time. You know, this is a Crisis on Infinite Universe, which was the main DC crossover event, is right around the corner. So this is happening. You know, Superpowers by Kirby is happening. Atari Force is happening. So there's DC's diversifying a bit, and this is part of their initiative. I mean, this is just solid comic booking. I mean, it's just it's fun stuff. Easy to read, easy to follow. And so what we have here, and by the way, these covers are very reminiscent of George Perez, just the level of detail and tight inking. Paris inking himself, Paris Cullins inking himself, which is rare. You won't see that often. By issue 4, we have him interacting with Zatanna and the rest of the DC universe by way of the Justice League. We get a great shot of the other superheroes, Elongated Man, Superman, drawn in this fun way. Like it actually fits the book, not only this book, but this universe, the DC universe, which is largely regarded as a friendlier, kind of lighter place. And lighter, that's not qualitative. It's more like it's just they deal in a different type of icon. You know, their characters are cut from a different mold, I think. But anyway, it's pretty interesting stuff. I mean, to see him flex some cool layouts, some magical, some mystical stuff. Steve Ditko would have been great at, but we would have been missed out on this great 6-issue chunk by Paris Cullins, who, by the way, yeah, here's issues 4, 5, and 6. He only lasted 6 issues drawing the interiors. I just want to flip through them real quick. We do have kind of a lot to unpack, and this isn't even really his entire bibliography, but just want to go over the general tone of his work. You can see it's really, really pretty. It's just really nice to look at. It's just very pleasant. Already we're getting into sort of goofball territory, you know, very it's not Bigfoot, but it's exaggerated. It's very it's just very expressive in the language of cartooning. And I don't know why he didn't go further, but he did draw the annual. And he would also be the cover artist for the rest of the series. So we will see his work routinely on Blue Devil. But this is just a thick annual with a bunch of guest stars, the Creeper, Demon, tons of people. So we get to see him draw all these characters. And that's sort of a feature of this stuff, of following these artists, is getting to see their version of the universe, of this DC universe. I think that's sort of part of its charm. It's the reason I look at this stuff, really, just to see how they draw it, how they figure out certain storytelling problems. And just stylistically, just it looks great. Just to see him draw Steve Ditko's Creeper is just fun. There's a nice pinup. Now, speaking of Steve Ditko, though, he would go on. Let me change this up. He would go on to draw or launch the Blue Beetle, which is a Steve Ditko creation. At this point, DC had acquired the rights to the Charlton characters, Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, etc. We all know that those characters were repurposed for the Watchmen, but the actual properties, the names, the costumes, the characters, they got their own line as well, integrated deeply with the DC universe. This one's written by Len Wein and drawn by Paris Cullins. Bruce Patterson's now the inker. And the interesting stuff about this, well, let's see, this ad in Amazing Heroes, you could see that house ad. And by the way, DC was really good at making house ads for promos, for just like individual pieces of art that you don't see anywhere else except here. So I always love looking at those. I believe Paris has told this story where he was at maybe a McDonald's one morning and he was drawing pages of the Blue Beetle. And he ran across Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko was just sort of curious as to what he was doing, and they hit it up. That's perhaps how they met, just in the wild. And I mean, look at that. It's just great. You just never saw stuff like that. It's just really, really cool stuff. And now, Ditko, I think they just talked all night. It might have been a night thing, and they spent all night at a McDonald's or something up on 51st or uptown, somewhere uptown. And Steve Ditko sort of blessed this project or approved it in an unspoken, unofficial way. But I mean, that's got to be cool. I mean, if you're a Ditko fan, or if you even care about comics history, to have the creator, one of the major voices in superhero comic books of the times and forever, that's got to be awesome. That's got to be great. So I think Paris, as you could see, is perfect for that. You know, he does that sort of DeLuca effect. He knows when to zoom in and crop shots and just kind of have, speaking of Ditko, again, just sort of like that famous Spider-Man lifting the weight off of him. I forget what issue that was, 31 or something. But anyway, there's Blue Devil. I don't know. He's employing a lot of different layouts while still being clear. He's packing a lot of information into these pages. He's moving the stuff around. It's just good looking people, crazy looking characters, lots of action, lots of believable scenarios, cool next issue panels. I always get a kick out of that. It's a little extra stuff. And so, yeah, he would remain on Blue Beetle for a while. Bruce D. Patterson, underrated inker, by the way. We saw a little bit of him over Keith Giffen in the previous episodes. But this would be his main book. This would be his main collaboration with Paris Cullins. And here we have the Madmen, created by Ditko. And we have Dr. Alchemy. I mean, this is really suited for Paris's strengths as just a comic book man. You know what I mean? Like, he's not an illustrator who's trying out comics. He's not an animator who's hooking up with comics here and there. He's just a dude who just, you could tell he was raised on comics, knows the language, and speaks it very, very well. You know, he's also not artsy. He's not weird. It's just super solid, beautiful stuff. You know, perfect for this book, you know. And the stories themselves, I mean, it's Len Wein, so it's perfect in a way. If anyone could craft the perfect superhero comic for this era, mostly it's a Bronze Age voice, but now this is the Copper Age. So he's still crafting these stories. They're pretty solid. This introduces the question in this title, another classic Charlton Ditko creation. So this 3-parter is pretty special in that regard. Just a big, I mean, look at this. It's super 80s in your typical sort of punk rock attire, drawn by non-punk rockers. This is just you see this in comic books all the time. I think it's hilarious. And just gangsters. It's just a big gang fight, gang war, you know, beautiful stuff. Obviously lots of, you know, Paris gives it enough space for all the characters to interact. Clearly, you're never confused. You know exactly where you are. Again, bad guy. Pretty good cast of characters, subplots. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Let's see. Again, he drew tons of these cards, so don't sleep on them. Come on, the 90s. So yeah, I'm not going to go through every page, but he did draw a bunch of these. This is the Legends crossover. That's a huge event post-Crisis. Now, he only drew the cover for this one. Chuck Patton drew this issue. Chuck Patton, who's also super solid. Paris. This is Paris's book through and through. Now we have Del Barris as an inker. Del Barris is very much like Aiken Garvey team. It's even more slick. It's slicker than Gary Martin, Bruce D. Patterson. There's almost like he puts like a weird sheen on things. Not to the. I mean, it makes Paris look fine. It's great. You're kind of used to Bruce D. Patterson or Martin. You know, they locked into that specific vibe. You know, it's very specific. And Paris, I assume, designed these characters, this new cast of characters, these new villains, Prometheus. And by the way, I would see these comics when I was first bin diving as a child. I would always see Blue Beetle back issues and Green Lantern back issues, and just the DC universe was sort of unfurling as I would bin dive. And so these covers, they hold a specific charge for me. They're very cool to see. And the comics themselves, they're totally cool too. I mean, they cross over with the Teen Titans, so you get to see Paris draw those characters. Again, some somewhat of a formless trick. You know, that's not typical. You didn't have to do that, but it's very interesting. Now for Amazing Heroes, the preview, you get to see a little bit of Blue Beetle. Let's see. So that's the cover to this. So this issue, number 14, minus the palm trees. And I like seeing stuff like that because you get to see it in pure, raw black and white. But now we're up to issue 14. He's given a whole year. He's dedicated his life to the Blue Beetle. But after this, he took a break. Let's see how he ends it. Because this is just steaming right along. You know, this is just, you know, Justice League's about to be renewed. It's already like in month 2 or 3 of Justice League, of which Blue Beetle is a member of. And so, you know, he's going to go through some changes. This book doesn't have long, has maybe another few issues. I believe the last issue is 23 or 24. But Paris comes back for this couple of issues. Great double page spread. More of an origin to the previous Blue Beetle. Inked by Danny Bulinati, who was the inker at the time of the series, over Ross Andrew. Ross Andrew, veteran artist from the 50s and 60s, known for Wonder Woman and Spider-Man. He was drawing Blue Beetle at the time. But man, even just Paris drawing civilians, clothes, settings, airplanes, he could do it all. He was a solid dude. I think describing it as solid is underselling it. I think this stuff is powerful. I think there's a lot of grace to this stuff. I mean, really killing it. He's just killing it. I mean, it's highly emotional. There's a lot of drama in these things, and that's sort of a mark of a well-balanced classic superhero comic book, right? Now that would be, I think that's it for him and Blue Beetle, but I didn't mean to skip ahead, but I do want to go over before Blue Devil though. I wanted to start off strong and go to his iconic property, but he did backup for this stuff. And for this stuff, I mean Green Lantern. There's a backup of Green Lantern Corps. Pretty solid. Can't really see too much Paris in this, but that's fine. He did another backup here. This is sort of right before Dave Gibbons enters the fray. But there's Dave Gibbons is a good example of solid, clean, direct comic booking. Paris has a credit in this, but it's mostly Rich Buckler. And the only thing that I can identify as Paris is stuff like this double page spread. That to me is Paris. It's a little clean. It's a nice design, whereas the rest is sort of like kind of Neil Adams-esque Rich Buckler stuff used for like a fill-in issue of Justice League. He drew a 3-part backup for Detective Comics featuring Green Arrow. And this is early Cullins, but you could see him coming into his own. There's the cartooniness, the fun in these characters. Written by Joe Cavalieri, I believe. Yes. Inked by Pablo Marcos. Green Arrow was the standard backup for Detective Comics for many years. But anyway, look, it has lots of bounce, has lots of liveliness to it. Even during quiet scenes, there's an energy running through it that's it's just nice to look at. It's infectious, really. I mean, it's tough to nail down, right? It's just you don't really see this every day, and it's inspired stuff, you know. When talking about Keith Giffen, the early stuff I discussed, when you're a young cartoonist, you're just putting a lot of work into this. You're trying to impress. You're trying to do your best. And you could kind of tell in this Green Arrow backup, that's sort of what Paris was trying to do. He was trying to go all out. And then this is probably his most reprinted stuff because it was written by Alan Moore. It's just a backup in Omega Men. It's just a 4-pager. And it's a neat story. It comes and goes. Very self-contained coolness. Again, and speaking of Keith Giffen, we talked about these little digests. And we looked at the covers because they were by Paris and they're beautiful. Again, him drawing these characters is such a treat. This is a double cover for the Legion. And he drew this cover for one of the reprint titles when Legion went reprint. And then speaking of covers, he would draw some great covers. Drew one for Batman. Oh yeah, let's see. Now we're tilting this. He drew Batman, Supergirl, more Batman. This one's inked by Dick Giordano. He drew this one. It doesn't look like him, to be honest. There's his name's on it. Dick Giordano's name's on it. But this looks like Alfredo Alcala or something. This doesn't really look like either one of these gentlemen. But, I believe him. This is a great cover. He also drew Superman, Wonder Woman a few times. Drew this Challengers. This is a little later. I don't want to move too far ahead. But by the way, these cards, he's now working on Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's doing a bunch of crossovers. And he also did Who's Who. Who's Who was the profile book, where you would get information about characters. And it would always feature this double cover, front and back cover, usually drawn by George Perez. And he would draw, let's see. He drew Blue Devil. And who else did he draw? Let's see. There's so many of these things. And again, every artist drew a profile here. So these are jam-packed with awesome art. Drew the Crime Syndicate. Let's see. And the reason I mentioned George Perez double covers is because he would eventually take over. Paris Cullins would eventually take over that job. And let's get rid of this and drink this in. He drew just as many covers as George Perez, and they have like up to 20-something volumes and an update and another update, and this is a lot. So this is sort of like a montage of just bodies, usually on the same plane. Sometimes it's just random figures, but it usually makes sense, some sort of internal sense. And they hit him up. They recognized that he had a fun style that vibed with the DC identity. He drew this Dr. Light, and that's the Keith Giffen Dr. Fate that we saw. This is inked by Eduardo Barreto, another great artist. And so let's see. I want to go through these who's who quickly because there's so many of them, but they're all worth looking at. Like, check this out. Forgotten Heroes, Forgotten Villains. Let's get rid of these. But there's a lot going on here. Lots of characters. And I wouldn't have minded having him draw a complete series by them. Here's another double cover that he drew. There we go. Great Green Lanterns. I mean, it's just so, it's great stuff. He was, I think him like Garcia Lopez, Dave Gibbons, John Byrne, they just have this sort of perfect 80s-ness to their work, built for superhero stories, for fantastical concepts, crazy designs. It's just all so rich. But like I said, George Perez was busy doing Crisis on Infinite Earths and tons of other, the history of the DC universe. So Paris Cullins, he got hit up to do these covers. Good stuff. And really, it's worth it I would say just for the covers alone. But these are great. I mean, if I know that Who's Who is amazing. But just in case, don't take my word for it. Just look at this stuff. It's fantastic. Now this, what did you draw here? Neburos, of course. Neburos, whom we saw in Blue Devil. That's a big bad in Blue Devil. Check these cards out. I mean, these came out in 90, I want to say 92, 91, 92. But he had to draw a bunch of these. Sort of like the Who's Who job. Got to draw some more Ditko and Changing Man, Shade the Changing Man. And let's see. The Trickster, who appeared in The Blue Devil. Paris Cullins, Gary Martin. And then this one. This final cover. It's final cover for the series, not forever, but it's a good one. It's got Wonder Woman, Zatanna, it's got Guy Gardner. It's got a bunch of updates. That's the end of a series, so it's just updating. As far as comics go, he drew this backup with Mike DiCarlo inking him. You will recognize that name, Mike DiCarlo, because he inked a bunch of Keith Giffen. Omega Men, Legion of Superheroes. This is an early Mark Waid, one of Mark Waid's first comic book stories. Not bad. And speaking of Legion of Superheroes, he drew this backup for issue 21, which is just featuring Wildfire and some cool cameos. Got some Astro Boy in there. This was also reprinted in this Kevin Maguire cover, by the way, real early. It's reprinted here, and this is the newsprint edition. Just the art's a little smaller. The printing's a little thinner, but it's still powerful stuff. His storytelling is still solid enough to withstand the printing process of the times. Now, he also drew a story here in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, in which we have the lots of good stuff in here. There's a Garcia Lopez draws something in here. Kevin Nolan, John Byrne. It's a good one. But Paris Cullins, he's rubbing elbows with the greats, He is one of the greats. Look at that. Powerful, sharp. It moves along, super kinetic. He's really coming into his own in terms of a figure maker, And that's really what it comes down to when it comes to these superhero comics, How well could you draw the figure, right? Now, so for some more consistency, he did 6 issues of The Forever People with J.M. DeMatteis, inked by Carl Kiesel, who, you know me, I love Carl Kiesel. I love J.M. as well. This was a 6-issue series talking about the Forever People, Jack Kirby's Fourth World characters. And this is super solid. I would see the ad for this book all the time and growing up, back issue hunting, reading these comics. I never read it. Not for many years. When I finally caught up to it, I loved it. It was great. Super solid, super respectful to the Kirby mythos, but moving it forward, doing something different with it. And I got to say, there's something about the inking that brings out something in Paris's work, which just gives it this sort of chiseled appeal. I mean, it just gives it an extra layer of intensity, of power. And it's great for the story. It never loses its sort of delicate aesthetic, because it is sort of very, not precious and about to break, but it's just pretty at times. And sometimes it's like super powerful. And this work is ideal for this story. JM really knows how to weave all these elements into something brand new. He takes an old concept and he just spins it. At the same time, he's doing the funny stuff with Giffen and Maguire over at the Justice League, but he's proving that he's more than that. I mean, also he came from some dark stuff. I mean, he had written Moonshadow and Kraven's Last Hunt. So JM, he's just a solid, well-rounded writer, and he delivered the goods here. Now, I have this issue of Amazing Heroes, which features this panel in black and white. And again, you know me, I'm a sucker for this stuff. We got 4 more issues, but before then, I forgot about this card. Look at that. Black and white. No logo. Black and white. Paris Cullins. Carl Kiesel. That's for this right here. It does Kirby proud. I mean, I think, I don't know if Kirby even looked at this stuff, but I mean the legacy of Kirby, they're both working hard to give it the respect it deserves while moving it forward, while utilizing this in the new spectrum of the DCU in a post-crisis world, post-Legends, post-millennium, of the DC universe is currently being shaped. So they're just relaunching tons of properties and attaching different types of sensibilities to these different kind of things. I mean, really, you gotta do yourself a favor and pick these up. I believe it's been collected. They've been collected. Final issue. It's a good solid read. It's available. Look at that. That is interesting because Paris's next major project is relaunching New Gods right on the heels of Cosmic Odyssey. written by Jim Starlin and Mike Mignola. That was a 4-issue, not event, but it was it was supposed to be an event, but it turned out to be just a 4-issue self-contained story that featured the New Gods primarily. And so they just launched this book written by Mark Evanier of DN Agents and Crossfire and Blackhawk fame. Now, again, very Kirby, but perfect because he was just playing with those properties. Paris was. I love this redesign of the New Gods, their civilian identities. I mean, it's so of its time, and it's cool. You don't really see them like that again. Not really. It's really just like in the superhero version. Lots of power, lots of directional mark making. It's just he knows his storytelling. He's solid. So this will be the longest thing that he had drawn because he lasts for a while. This is 1989. But before that, or at the same time, again, I don't know what the artistic chores, how they're dispersed around this time, but he drew a fill-in for Green Arrow, inked by Gary Martin, which is it's fine. It's a nice Paris Cullins, but something about the Gary Martin's inks, really, it flattens out Paris's weight. He gives these characters a sort of dimension. And again, it's fine. It looks okay, which it's just weird to see them reunited, and these results just don't really reflect what they're best at. Anyway, Paris also drew this Captain Atom annual on the newsprint quality paper. And it's loosely connected to the Justice League. Captain Atom was one of the characters, and there's subplots that involve their villains, and again, fun stuff. He drew a segment in this issue of Checkmate. There's Todd Smith. Ed Barreto drew a segment, but Paris Cullins drew this middle section, and you could already tell it's Paris, like just the way he draws faces and jaws and eyeballs. I mean, already that sort of dead gaze, that's him. Those teeth, those eyes. I mean, it's classic Cullins, right? He also drew this in the wake of Byrne, post Byrne. This was the Roger Stern era. I believe Dan Jurgens was the usual monthly artist. He was doing the backups for this month, and Paris Cullins stepped it up. Inked by Dennis Jenke. Mostly Mr. Mixelplick. So we only really get to see a Superman drawing there, here, kind of there. It's funny, this is sort of like that, like the Gary Martin inked version. It's like this is fleshed out. It's kind of losing some of that, and then this is supposed to be like a flat cartoony style. So it's sort of an interesting formalist brain exercise looking at these panels. But yeah, it's mostly in the story, Superman is exiled himself to the cosmos, and so here it's pretty much a civilian story, but fun. Also Hawk and Dove. Just drew this one issue, but it's still fun. See, night. I mean, he draws this cast so well. I mean, geez. No matter what he works on, it just looks so great. Dennis Rodier. Not sure how you say that. I think I've seen a pencil version of this. Anyway, Legion. This is the last one we're going to see in terms of fill-ins, not for a while, but we looked at this in the Giffen episode of 5 years later, and again, nice drawing, nice inker. It would have helped the story if it was a 9-panel grid to fit the tenor of the Legion book at the time. But looking at the art itself, just looking at the drawings itself, it is very Paris and very just fun. It's just fun to look at. But we're here for New Gods. New Gods. Let's see. Speaking of New Gods, here's some more cards featuring those New Gods. Almost running out of these. This was weird because Starlin came back for 2 or 3 issues. So this must have been just some sort of proposal post-Cosmic Odyssey, but Mark Evanier stepped in and became the regular writer. And Mark Evanier doesn't have many great things to say about this working experience on his blog. He has an extensive blog, and he's a pretty honest dude when it comes to his working conditions. By the way, I mean, just take it all in. It's just perfect. Perfect modern Kirby. Not many people were doing Kirby around this time. Not in this way. And by the way, this isn't beholden to Kirby too much. This is fairly just Paris Cullins, but it still has that Kirby vibe. Anyway, the working conditions here, I guess, were just a little less than ideal. I don't know if they just had to deal with last minute changes or if they were butting heads in the direction that it would go in. But we got a lot of, at least a dozen cool looking comics out of it. You know, and they were really going for it. They were really just, here we go. Let me take a look at this. Here's Bloodline Part 1. This was advertised everywhere. So you got this trifecta. Well, I think it's 4. Yeah, it's 4. Of just big splash page portraits of Orion changing. And it's a cool formalist thing that could only happen in comics. They're using the comics form to roll this out, to just advance a story. It's a good visual. And it's just super effective. Yeah, Bloodlines. And then it's been a year. That marks a year. Oh, there's more parts too. Oh, no. There are 4. Let me get that right. 12. Did I skip a bunch? Anyway, you get the idea. Where's 9 and 10? Oh, you know what? I don't think he drew those. I think that's the problem. Yeah, anyway, he gave it a year, and he stuck around for a while. Let's see some of these too. Last ones. War of the Gods. Yeah, he would stick around for covers, but really he was just sticking it out longer than usual, you know? So over a dozen issues, over a year's worth of work, about a year and a half. Solid covers, great. Wooly Blyberg is the inker. Oh, and I should note that he was the co-plotter. Paris was co-plotting this with Mark Evanier. So I don't know if that's a Marvel method type of thing where he would just draw, what they discussed, and then Mark would script over it. But here we go. 16 and 17. He's still drawing the covers, not the interiors. Well, he drew a little bit of this one, but this sort of is the passing of the guard. Changing of the guard, passing the baton to Rick Hoberg. But great covers still, fantastic covers. You drew a little bit of this one. You could kind of tell it's him up front because it's got that sort of that comic book bombast. Like he really knows how to make an effective double page spread. But it wasn't meant to be. This was going to be canceled eventually, and it's weird because you could tell even in the back pages there was no letter pages for like 7 or 8 issues. It's just like it was on the chopping block and then it was gone. Now he drew some stuff in here. He drew the Starfire segments here. Again, great. You know, we are looking at comic books here, so it feels redundant saying it's very comic booky, but that's just, some guys have that. Some artists have that. You know, I think of guys like Ron Frenz, Tom Grummett. They're just so good at this specific type of language. It's a visual language that's just, it's just tailor-made for this stuff, for this material. Anyway, it's a fill-in for Teen Titans. Good stuff. Same here. This is more shared with Kerry Gamble, another one of those artists I was talking about, who's just, this is what they do. This is what I believe they do really well. They do it so well. We're going to be closing up now. This two-parter, oh, well, he did some of the here, but this two-parter, he had to mimic Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, Captain America type stuff. That was the riff for these stories in Justice League America 48 and 50. But if you know what you're looking for, that's very Cullins. That's very those big fists. Sort of nice superhero pose. And then for this, it's just, again, it's just a few pages. Trying to do that sort of not early Marvel, but it's like 50s, very like late stage golden age type of Joe Simon inking Jack Kirby. For this, he goes over to Marvel. He's not a Marvel guy. He wasn't a Marvel guy, but he went over to Marvel for this stuff. I believe great Kyle Baker. These are good roster of people, good anthologies. But you get to see Paris Cullins work his magic on this stuff in a superhero-esque tradition. Like, he gets to draw these characters and give them that spin. You could already sort of tell, like, it's just so funny how, I mean, look at this. That's like a crazy money shot right there. I think it works. I think it shows that he's broadening his stylistic palette. And, you know, he'll be back at DC working, did 5 or 6 issues of this with William Messner Loebs. But the inker's are already modernizing him in a weird way. Andy Parks, Romeo Tongal. They're giving him that 90s slickness in bits and pieces, you know. And he still got it. He's still delivering the goods, but it's still, I guess the inkers were just, that's how they wanted to remain employed. Just, I mean, hey, Al Milgrom did it. Al Milgrom was from the 70s and 80s. And then he started getting super slick in the 90s. I mean, it happens to everyone. It's a business. You want to stay employed. You want the editors to call you back. You want them to give you jobs. So anyway, back to Marvel. Drew the Avengers in this What If. Pretty neat stuff. Simon Furman of Transformers and Marvel UK fame. You know, it's just, you get to see Paris draw the Marvel Universe, especially the Punisher. An odd fit, a little awkward, but it's interesting. Anyway, speaking of awkward, speaking of 90s inking, Hyperkind, Clive Barker's pocket of comics in the 90s. We're talking about 94, 93? Yeah, 93. It's cool to see Paris Cullins push and break formation. And it is very 90s chaotic. You can still tell it's him. You can still see that nice figure work, those expressive faces, solid comic book, superhero language type stuff, that manic face, that swing, that very Ron Frenz swing. I mean, they you know, I gotta be honest, it all stems from Kirby. You know what I mean? Anyway, I only have this issue. He drew it for about 6, I believe. And then this is a jam book, and the credits say George Saravia, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not familiar with this book at all, this title. I'm pretty sure that's him, but Paris Cullins has a credit in the back, and I'm pretty sure this is him. This splash and this double splash page. So anyway, that's about it. Now, around this time, he was going to do a comic called Marcus Arena. This was a post-Image Comics. There was Axis Comics, which Larry Stroman of Tribe fame and X Factor fame, they were going to do their own comic book company called Axis. Mike Grell went over with the Shaman's Tears. Not many comics were published by them. So this is just a hype article in the pages of a Hero Illustrated. And they talk about Marcus Arena, where Paris was going to draw it. You know, he was coming up with the concept for it. There's no art at all. There's no evidence that Marcus Arena was ever a thing. But there is art for Atomiclones. That's one word, Atomiclones, which was going to come out in 1990 by Comico. And there's a listing that credits Robert Lauren Fleming. But that never came out. That never came out, unfortunately. But the piece of art is actually really neat. Anyway, we're back to this. I want to finish off his segment with the Who's Who binder art and some other fun stuff. But he got to draw Orion and some of this back piece, which I think is original art. This might have been repurposed from the cover. This little piece right there, but not these main pieces. These are great. Metron, Highfather, Apocalypse. He's really, I mean, he was the guy. He was the New Gods guy. Drew this Draga. Inner Gang, some Superman Office characters, and some 5 years later stuff. See, this is very Keith Giffen-y. He's locking into that style, whereas that previous fill-in didn't. It felt like a fill-in. Dal H for Hero. And then he also drew the covers to these Mayfair RPG modules. And these, I love these. These came out in 1990, around that time when he was doing those cards. So he was getting out of comic booking and into this other stuff. These don't really have original art on the interiors. It's all repurposed from comics. But he drew that cover. He drew this great New Genesis piece right here for this cover. Oh man, he was really made for the New Gods, really. Fantastic Justice League Europe cover, which looks to be blown up. This looks to be like it was printed from a photocopy that was colored. The printing's a little funny on this one. And then this one, this is great to see this roster. You could tell it's post Giffen Justice League because you have these characters involved and they're meeting these random villains from the DC. I mean, this is dynamite stuff. Man, I could look at this stuff all day. He has work in this. I talked about this in the Giffen issue because Giffen's in here. I can't show much of it, if any, but I can show this first page, which he drew. Now, Giffen wrote all of it. Keith Giffen's a writer of this huge storyline. And he drew a segment in here, and so did Bart Sears, and so did Paris Cullins. And this is about the only family-friendly page I could show. But please, I implore you, please look at this stuff. Look at this issue. There's some craziness from Giffen that is hilarious. I mean, you will you will thank me for it. It's nuts. And it's got Paris Cullins. It's great. Now, moving on to Steve Lightle, I want to do some cards too because he drew some cards as well. You know, these guys would draw comics, they would draw merch, they would do a lot of cards. So I just want to set those there. Steve comes from AC Comics, Steve Lightle, inked by Jerry Ordway, which is interesting because Ordway is such a powerful inker over other people, and you could still tell this is Steve Lightle. So that's interesting. And this is early Steve. This is also early Steve. New Talent Showcase. He had about 3 issues. And this is just a nice black and white version of those issues. And some Legion stuff. So this is right around when he started getting work at Legion. But before that, he did this Batman and the Outsiders with Mike Barr. Sal Trapani. Doesn't really look like Steve. It's early Steve. But it's still nice, solid stuff. You know, that's like your big comic book shot. It's your big superhero charge moment. He would also do some more Outsiders. When they also, you know, Teen Titans, Legion of Superheroes, and the Outsiders, they both got Baxter edition comics and the newsprint. So this would be the newsprint, and this would be the Baxter edition. Which means fancier paper, better printing, and sometimes more pages of story. And so with those extra pages, sometimes you would have backups as extras. And Steve drew this 2-part Looker story. And he inked himself on this, and already he's fully formed. He's already like a strong voice. He already knows what he's good at, which is basically everything. No joke. I mean, look at this. He was putting out his own comics for a long time, Power Comics. Those are pretty fun to look at if you find them. But he got the gig with Legion when he went over to DC, when he first broke into DC, really. And so what happened was, as I covered in the Giffen episode, I believe it was the second episode, where it was like he took over for Keith because Keith just went on to other projects. But to justify Keith's name being on the cover, to honor the orders that the book came in because of Keith would do layouts for Steve Lightle to draw. And that's how the layout artist era of Keith's came about. And Steve was perfect because he was a comic book fan, a Legion of Superheroes fan. So he knew his stuff. He loved this stuff. He definitely gave it that sort of energy that a young fan wanting to impress could only give. The thing is, he would sort of remain at that gear for the rest of his career. He just really gave it his all, as we'll see. Now, again, these are Keith Giffen layouts, reprinted here. A year later, they would get reprinted. And, this is like a full bleed drawing, meaning it goes off the page. And for this newsprint stuff, you couldn't really do that. Something about the printing process just wouldn't allow for that sort of approach in page layout. So you would get this. Here, let me get this out of the way so you could see the border. And that's why the art is smaller. The printing's different paper. This one's not as egregious. There are some really wild differences in other issues. And overall, it's not bad because you get new covers also. This is a different chance to see different artists on your stories. Now, again, this is Keith Giffen layouts for issue numbers 4 and 5. Keith Giffen stayed on as layout artist up until issue 5. And then he bailed. And this was part of a huge storyline. It was the relaunch of the series at number 1. Extra pages, big deal, lots of fights, lots of drama. There's a death involved. It's killer stuff, man. I mean, Steve really brought it. Again, this is that newsstand edition with a great cover by Ed Barreto. Like, see, you rarely saw Eduardo Barreto drawing Legion. But you got to see it here in this early variant. And so here, Steve got to draw his own cover. So, because that's a Keith Giffen cover with Keith Giffen layouts, but that's Steve Lightle art. And again, like I said, it's just he's got his own vision. It's clear cut. He knows how to draw the figure. He knows the technical stuff, shading, proportion, setting. and he's applying it to this cast of millions, so many people, so many characters to draw, and he loved drawing all of them. Fantastic. Look at that. And no matter what it prints in, this looks great. When he drew the covers for these two, but it's interesting to see the different approaches. Like how did he solve this problem? It's a lightning last story. But for this one, it's a little bit more complex. It's a little bit busier. This is just more of a solid, maybe for the newsprint, newsstand audience, which skews younger or just more casual for the casual reader. Let me move these along. By the way, if you don't have these are worth it just for the art alone. These came out in the 90s. We'll talk about it in a second, but I really do want to get to these Legions because this is the longest run he will have, this Legion stuff. And again, I want to show the newsprint and the direct market. So this came out, let's say in February 1985. This came out February 86. And that's just the way that deal worked out. And again, solid superhero, beautiful stuff. Crazy drama, soap opera in space. It's teenagers in the future, connected to the DC universe. Oh, he drew a segment in Batman 400 as well. So he was getting around. Again, he got to draw 2 covers. Not everyone gets that shot just to revisit the concept of the issue. And this, by the way, he's done this. He'll do this later on. But that letter treatment, that logo treatment, that's something that was started by Keith Giffen. I mean, it had been happening in comics here and there, Aquaman or I can't think of any others at the moment, but it's really cool when it happens, because it does set it apart and it does stand out in the stands. Again, direct market, busy, solid, just image. And they're both compelling. They're both interesting. I personally lead more towards this one. I really like this one. It's super striking. This is just a bunch of superheroes that look cool, but as an image, as just on a design level, this one kills it. Of course, the printing cannot be beat in this Baxter edition. If you're coming in for the first time, I should let you know that I think the Baxter paper and the Baxter printing is the best in comic books. It's the best comic books we'll ever see. Ever. That's just a fact. Cool Jerry Ordway cover. The guy who inked, Jerry Ordway. He inked that previous cover that we just saw. Anyway, Steve Lightle, this is the longest run he had on anything. He lasted over a year. He would do the occasional thing. Well, like this is a fill-in, right? But he did the cover. But then he came back for this. He did these covers, right? But then he came back and he stayed back. He didn't just leave. He did issues 13. Let's see. He did a bunch. He stuck around because he was a fan and he was a workhorse. He was pumping these out, and these weren't casual comics. These were 25 plus pages of tons of superheroes. Legion of Superheroes is also one of the appeal of these comics too, is that they would involve the audience in voting for new characters, voting for leaders. They would listen to their audience in what seems to be a pretty transparent, honest way. That there's no reason to doubt that. It's not just lip service. So if someone wanted a certain character to be a leader, they would get it. They would pretty much decide. And sometimes that would backfire, and they realize, oh, we didn't actually really want this person to be at the forefront, So I was pretty curious. And so every once in a while, you would get all these new characters, and Steve designed a bunch of these, specifically Tellus. because he wanted more of an alien looking creature to represent that sort of species in this far-flung future. You know, to his credit, he figured, is everyone going to be just a beautiful model with zero body fat, just hanging out in skin-tight suits? Is that everyone? Even though he's really good at drawing that, he was thinking about this in that deep of a way. And so he introduced Tellus and Quizlet. Eventually, Quizlet was sort of like a mystery member, you know. Oh, by the way, the newsprint editions have this little corner box, usually just for a barcode or an ad, but people started drawing in them eventually. And this is the only one that he drew on. And he drew this character hugging the Legion. I don't know if that's in Legion L or something in Interlac. I'm sure you guys know. Anyway, we're almost wrapping up his Legion run. But this is post Crisis on Infinite Earths, in which, spoiler alert, one of the major players dies. And a member of the Legion is sad about it. And he, you know, Steve Lightle drew this very emotionally charged issue. I mean, it's heavy stuff. Again, drew 2 sets of covers. Same right here. But this one's when Greg LaRocque took over. Greg LaRocque would take over for Steve, and he would last a few years until Giffen's return eventually in '89. Great cover of just what it says. It's a new beginning. It's a great starting out, a jumping on point. Greg LaRocque was great as well. He eventually took over for Flash. He drew Flash for many, many years. And see, just profiles and stuff by Greg. But this is a fantastic cover. Steve would return for this issue, this Mon-El specific issue. And here we get to see a little bit of what looks to be pencil work. Let's see. It's rare that you see this. You never see this stuff. It's in this Amazing Heroes preview. And this issue's special because I believe he had a fondness for this character. And he had a messed up story. But he was already, you know, Steve was already involved in so many other projects, but he made the time to really just draw this segment. Inked by DiCarlo, I believe. Yeah, Mike DiCarlo. Interesting. He didn't draw this cover, but they kept the interiors. You know, nice stuff. And again, he would go on to draw covers for the Legion for the remainder of the run, pretty much. This is one of the reprints for the annual. Now, yeah, here's some cards. I'm going to clear the decks just to see. You see that? Mysterio and Phoenix. And I'm going to bring these back. But for this, here, let's see. I want to bring this in. This print that he did. Legion of Superheroes for the History of the DC Universe portfolio. Let's see. And it's a great piece. It just shows just all the major players from the time period. Maybe if I put it like that, you could see all of it. But it's worth seeking out. I mean, it's a portfolio which has 12 plates, 12 different artists. You know, Giffen did a Dr. Fate. John Byrne did a new set of characters that never saw print anywhere. But this is just cool stuff. Now, he also did some Who's Who. Tons of Who's Who, actually. He did the Legion of Supervillains. Did Polar Boy. Did Tellus. And, I mean, tons more. Yeah, again, these were good for just different artists. And I'm swimming in these issues. I got to be honest with you. Because check this out. Shadowlast. Who else? Fatal 5. Who else? Colossal Boy. There's so many others. There's so many others. But you get the gist. He's a great artist. He was a great artist. But he did a bunch of covers also. Secret Origins. Legion. Tons of Legion. You know, he drew this, the Universo project. It's a great design. He drew this iconic, this pivotal issue for the Legion. This is when, the repercussions of the John Byrne reboot post-crisis. So it's a pretty emotional story. He drew this Cosmic Boy miniseries. Drew these covers. He drew the Legion Who's Who. They had their own Who's Who segment. But the cool thing about these books is that they really flesh out their history and their world. So it's not just profiles. It's just these text pieces accompanying the art or vice versa. I mean, I get these for the art, but you know what I mean? Like it's all great. It's all of a kind. And so Steve would not only draw the interiors, he would draw this double page spread really for the first two issues. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Around this time, he took over Doom Patrol. He helped relaunch Doom Patrol. And this has a double cover as well. It's another comic that he loved. He loved the original, the weird comic from the 60s, which, by the way, is exceptional. It's one of the better Silver Age comics out there that holds up, that more than holds up. But anyway, there he is, Gary Martin, inking Steve Lightle, giving it this almost like a plastic sheen to it. They're a good combo. And Steve is, he's not too experimental in his design here, even though that's sort of a thing that he would carry on throughout his career. He's pretty well behaved here. He's, he recognizes that it's a first issue. We got to draw people in. There's this bad guy, which I believe he designed. So it's not crazy stuff, but it is neat to see. And from what I hear, they were just waiting for the way Erik Larsen tells it. They were waiting for him to sort of disappear, Steve Lightle. They knew he couldn't hack it, but they got him to do this book anyway. I mean, that's up to Mike Gold to dispel or not. But I guess they started this monthly book, and he wasn't a monthly guy. He had done that for the Legion, but not here. No, this is not. And the amount of effort that he was putting in, I mean, it seems like the deadlines would catch up with him. Gary Martin still inking. Gary Martin would go on to ink the entire series pretty much, or for a long while. Definitely the Erik Larsen stuff. Erik Larsen being the artist who took over Steve Lightle and got fan backlash because he was nowhere near Steve Lytle's level. I mean, their aesthetics are completely different. And those are great too. Those comics are great. They're just different aesthetics. And I could see if you're a fan, if you're just a collector type, you're just taken aback by the sudden shift in gear. I mean, it's pretty intense actually. But this stuff is nice to look at. It's a cool 5-issue run. And I believe these were recently reprinted in a huge omnibus. All the Doom Patrol stuff. But it introduces new characters. There's a new cast of villains. Steve Lytle's getting a little playful in the paneling. So much text. Look at that. It's good. Text is good. Words are good. No offense to the word makers, but these are nice pictures, aren't they? They're so nice. I mean, oh, look at these pictures. They're so good. Anyway, enough Doom Patrol. God damn it. Get that out of here. He did something here. I know what he did. Oh, who's who? There he is. I told you he designed this person. I'm electing to think that he designed this character. Because, I mean, look at that. Great headshots. Wonderful stuff. More Legion. More Legion covers. Legion. Interlac. You barely see this on covers. For someone to actually care and go through the alphabet, and God knows what that says. I did that once. I looked it up. I forgot what it says. Legion. Wanderers. A Legion adjacent title. Infamous story. At least if you had the internet 20 years ago. He went to Marvel. He did this fill-in. Drew this little cool Cyclops in the corner box. Not a bad... I mean, he inked himself, you know. It's got cool looking stuff, you know. Not a bad fill-in. X Factor was a Walt Simonson title written by his wife, Louise Simonson. And it would occasionally have fill-in artists such as David Mazzucchelli, Mark Silvestri, and Steve Lightle was now one of them. But that's all he drew. And yet he remained in the X offices, drawing these wonderful covers. Oh, I remember seeing this back in the day. It was so... Oh, man, this is so good. And this issue 33 was my first X-Men comic. It's what made me fall in love with the X-Men, really. And it's a John Byrne comic who I knew from Superman, from DC. But this is the thing that got me into X-Men. So it's pretty monumental for me, at least. Pretty covers. Pretty... Steve Lightle covers, drawing the Dark Phoenix saga, drawing the later run of John Byrne, sticking around for some other stories. He lasted over a year, maybe a year and a half doing this stuff. But back to DC. He was drawing these things. You know about these things, right? You just looked at them. He only drew a few, but they're beautiful. 5 years later. Isla Rans. Man, he was just... He was great. He was such a good artist, man. He really fit these characters. He really cared about this stuff. You could just tell, you know. Reverse Flash, Black Racer. Look at this. Look at this creep. Ugh, grim stuff. Story-wise, grim stuff. Lady Quark, member of the Legion, 89. Just, I like these little character bits because he's telling a story even in just these little panels. He doesn't have to do this. He just could, even that angle, that's telling us something about this character. He just puts so much care and thought. He put so much of himself into this work. Maybe that's why he couldn't do a monthly, because of just this stuff takes a long time. Secret Six. This is a Dan Spiegel comic that ran in Action Comics Weekly, this version of the Secret Six. And that just means you now have to go out and get it. That's all I'm saying. Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Man, ugh. But he would pivot to Marvel. He was kind of easing off DC. He would do these covers. He did this great Spider-Man Saga one cover. Pretty simple, pretty bold. And then conversely, he would do this. Just look at that insane backdrop. I mean, it's wonderful. You got to draw every major character from what they're talking about in here. This is pretty much just like a Wikipedia, pre-Wikipedia info dump, like Marvel Saga. You know, when this information wasn't as readily available and these issues were difficult to come across or expensive when discovered, you know, so this was filling you in on the stuff if you wanted to care about it. But yeah, more covers. He drew these 2 issues of Quasar. My loving Quasar. I love Quasar. You know this about me. I wrote a huge piece at the Comics Journal about Quasar. I know you read it, and I know you agreed with everything I said. including that the Steve Lightle story is fantastic. Not only in story, but in execution. To see him draw these Marvel characters, it's just such a gift. But it only lasted for this issue, right? During the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. And some of this issue. So he drew the covers, right? And then this introduction. And then that is it. Just a few pages featuring her. That's her right there. And then it changes from Steve Lightle to Andy Smith. And Andy Smith would then become the series artist. So for just that short bit, we had Steve Lightle drawing Wendell Vaughn. Because he was busy doing this. He was busy working with Ann Nocenti on a Wolverine Typhoid Mary story in which his art starts getting grungier, scratchier, definitely more experimental. Now, he said it was because of the subject matter, the darker subject matter. It's more violent, more psychotic, and it fits the description of both characters. Both Wolverine and Typhoid Mary were, you could argue, they were psychopaths. And this is just built for Steve. This was built for him. He redesigned this character. Originally, it was designed by John Romita Jr. She went through a couple different looks, but this was full on Steve Lightle. Great, solid, designs. This ran for a long time. These are a few issues, but it's been collected. These issues have been collected. Then there's another Ghost Rider Typhoid Mary team up, I believe, and Steve drew those. This is really, he's really pushing it here. He's really going artsy by his estimation. He's not a grid guy. He's not going to go by a grid, So now he's at Marvel. He's definitely a Marvel guy at this point. And this anthology holiday book, he did a Spider-Man story in which he fights Electro. Great rubbery Spider-Man, not quite McFarlane, but he wouldn't do that because he's not that kind of exaggerator. He's not going to push it in that way. He's going to still be very representational. Steve Lightle will be. Great Carrie Gamble piece. These books are good for that. They're going to have just a good roster of wonderful artists. Nice final splash page. He draws a cool Spider-Man, He also draws a cool everybody. This is an anniversary issue, issue 150. And I believe he created that character. Got to draw the Black Armor Daredevil. That's a cool rarity. But yeah, Wolverine and Typhoid Mary, they reunite for this story. And you could tell he's having a ball. Yeah, okay, so I lied. It's a little bit of a grid, but come on. But then he's going to play around a little bit. You know what I'm saying? A guy's got to entertain himself doing this stuff. Now man, just take that in. A little pencil work, shot from a pencil. Very effective. Now, usually this Marvel Comics Presents title, as you may know, was an anthology title of typically four stories in one issue. This is just one main story, and it's all drawn by Steve Lightle. So it's 4 different characters, another Typhoid Mary redesign. But it's a Steve Lightle showcase. So issue 150, look for it. This is great. The final issue of this series is 175, in which he drew the cover, both of them. the new Genix. He wrote this one. He wrote it, and he penciled it, and he inked it. And you know what? I'll be honest. It looks good. Look at this. Look at this good artwork. But that's not it. I swear it's not it. He drew this. You can't see it because of the gold treatment, but it says Web of Spider-Man Super Special. Draws a fun Venom. Draws a fun Spider-Man. Draws a fun Carnage. Draws a fun Ben Reilly. Now this is a post-Clone Saga, Maximum Carnage. There's lots of craziness and activity in the spider offices. And so this wraps up a huge storyline. And he got to draw it. It's kind of nutty looking. Forgive the glare, but these now are 96, 95, 96. So that Typhoid Mary stuff, that's around 92, 93. This is really just a wonderful, wonderful issue of just, you never see Venom like that. How cool is that? If you care about that sort of stuff, of course. Great Mary Jane, of course. I mean, we knew he was going to draw Great Mary Jane. Now, as far as these cards, there's a Spider-Man, X-Men. Let me see if I could just go through these, because these are really cool. Craven. There's that Typhoid. There's the Typhoid Mary, which he drew for. I think this is volume 2. This is volume 1994. I don't know. But this creates a poster, and this is Captain America, and just a bunch of characters from the Maximum Carnage storyline. And it's funny that he signs, I think, all of them. Just they have let's see. There's that little signature. Do they all have it? I guess I was wrong. Apologies. But here it is. That's a nice little thing. There's Carnage in the background. And that's what the Spider-Man comics were during this period. It's just chaotic. Just throw everything against the wall, see what sticks, and see what sells. And everything was selling. But this was around the bust. This was ending. The dream was ending. The boom was coming to a close. It was tough to get gigs, but he got some. He got to draw a little bit of this Spider-Man 96 annual. This was Ron Frenz, inked by John Romita. It had to have been cool, but he drew this one. Inked by Al Williamson, who's an unlikely pairing with him. It's not bad. I don't think he pushes Steve's work the way it's usually pushed. But I don't see Al Williamson in this either. Like Al Williamson, you really saw in John Romita Jr.'s work. This is just sort of like ink line to make it print. I don't really see much of Al Williamson's fingerprint on this stuff, but it's a cool story. It's cool to see Steve do stuff like this. But anyway, we will be seeing less and less of Steve on the stands. I mean, this was 96 and this was 98. He drew this cover and he drew this short story featuring Superboy, written by Ivan Velez of Blood Syndicate. Remember Milestone and the Blood Syndicate title? Great title. Ivan Velez Jr. was writing Ghost Rider around this time, was doing more mainstream work. And it's a cute short story, But this is, again, 1998, cut to the year 2003. He's back at Legion in 2003, and then later at 2004. So he's doing Legion covers, and interiors. Pretty interesting stuff. This is a focus issue on Shadowlass. You know, good solutions to have just a character in the dark. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, it's actually kind of great. And then this one, again, it's just sort of new coloring. You know, I want to say early digital, but this is already, we've been doing digital coloring for a decade now, you know. He gets to draw Tellus again. That's really neat. And then Legion, one more time. This is for the New 52. This came out around 2012, 2011. But he got to draw this fill-in issue, reunited with Paul Levitz. Fun stuff. He only drew half of an issue. But what you want to get is this issue of Back Issue, because it has not only this great cover. Let's see. Let's do this. Great cover. Tons of art like this, original art. A great interview with him. There he is. Back in the day, in the 80s. Great redesigns. I mean, it's really, this is a must-have, this issue. And so is this. Not only does this have interviews with every major player in the Legion offices, but yeah, which includes Steve, of course, especially in his coming up, in his introduction. There's that big print that I just showed. His earlier work, that Jerry Ordway piece, and just lots of cool stuff in black and white. It's great interview, but also these commission pieces. You know, fans would commission artists to draw their favorite characters, their favorite Legionnaire. So this is the only place you're going to get to see him drawing these characters in this isolated fashion. And it's not only in his interview, but it's peppered all throughout the book. It's all over the place because they just have to fill in certain spots around text. But you see, like that kind of stuff. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Now, Steve had a comic called Justin Zane. They just showed a little bit of that here. But he had a Patreon. He had a Patreon that I signed on to, and he would update it regularly with new comics that he would write, draw, and color himself. And I think it never saw print, but I think there was an ad that was printed in some comic. I don't recall what it is. It's some local small press thing. And but Justin Zane is, you could still see it online. But it's cool. It's just him going off and doing comics his way, and it's like he's taking more control over the final product. It's really inspired stuff. So he always gave it his best, and we all benefited from it. Now, the next and final artist I want to talk to about is also featured in this Legion Companion, and that is Ernie Colón. Now, he was a dude who wrote and drew and edited and colored and just did it all. So naturally, I'm attracted to that sort of energy, you know, someone who tries to do it all himself. He wasn't on the Legion for too long, so his bio is short. His interview is brief. But he did cross over with a bunch of these dudes. It's just a bunch of these Legion people. And if you don't know Ernie's work, he started at Harvey drawing stuff like Richie Rich and Casper the Friendly Ghost. And then he started doing stuff like this, like Manimal. You know, this came out in a book called Hot Stuff. And that's Hot Stuff, not the Harvey book, but Stuff with one F. And it's a sort of mid-ground type of book. meaning it's not in the newsstands, it's not underground, it's sort of like a ground level sort of thing. And you would get a lot of these sort of Neil Adams continuity studios type of artists flexing their sort of independent spirit, still working on genre material and having a low print run. And so Hot Stuff, what was that? Largely they were anthologies. Hot Stuff was an anthology. And Manimal is one of the stories that Ernie Colón drew. Now, keep in mind, he comes from the world of Richie Rich, which is Bigfoot, which is cartoon, even Archie is a little bit more representational in its proportion. This is like big-headed little kids and ghosts playing around, cut to this very graphic adult material. So already he's like showing off that he could do this and do it well and tell a clear, cool story in a compelling way and show some gnarliness along the way. Now, this is a gray wash effect. A lot of these black and white magazines would have that as a sort of a feature, Now, this collection was printed in 86. But this stuff came out in the 70s. This came out in the mid 70s, early to mid 70s. It's pretty graphic stuff. I shouldn't flip through all of it because it does get intense. It's sort of like pre-Faust. And then he just added this story in the back that's sort of related. But again, he's employing tons of different techniques, whether it be cross-hatching or line work or photo stats. It's cool stuff. Great stuff. Atlas Comics. This is where Keith Giffen wanted to get a job at, where he first applied, but he got there too late. They were closing their doors. But before then, you got guys like Ernie Colón, Howard Chaykin, Steve Ditko drawing stuff for Atlas. But he got to do these 2 issues, inking himself. Now that's one thing. He will mostly ink himself. We've talked about Paris Cullins and Steve Lightle. Paris Cullins had other inkers. Steve Lightle was his own inker by and large, especially the second half of his career. But Ernie Colón was really his own inker for the majority of his career, unless it was some sort of like time crunch or some sort of breakdown in work and employment. Now this stuff, there's some sort of elegance here. There's also he's retaining some cartooniness to give it some sort of life, not unlike Paris Cullins. So that's a good combination too. If any of these artists are connected beyond just a Legion tradition, it's that they're good comic book dudes. They just knew how to draw a great comic book page. They knew what it took to lay it out, to get the eye flowing, to misdirection. They're controlling the reader with their art. They knew what they were doing and they did it differently. So it's interesting to compare in how they did that, not only in style, but in actual execution of the storytelling, the narrative. This is a house ad for these kind of books. Just interesting to see him draw these different kind of characters, a sign of things to come right there with that character. But these are cool 2 kind of done-in-one stories, kind of goofball, interesting solutions to these things. Great cover. But it came and went. If you could find these comics, great. I don't believe they've ever been reprinted. That's such an Illustrator thing right here. That's sort of like open shadow where the jaw is not fully rendered. Great little profile. I mean, that's like romance comics from the 70s, fashion illustration. You can maybe tell some of this are from photos, some photo reference, but some like, as an artist, you sort of build your own language, your own file system mentally. You could do it from memory. Sometimes you use a reference here and there. I'm sure for a horse, you use reference. For that car, But for that dude, he probably just drew him, But Ernie would mix it up in a cool way. He always, sometimes it could get away from an artist. You could tell when it's reference and it's disproportionate to what he normally draws. But Ernie knew how to blend it really well. He definitely had his own voice for this stuff. Now, Grim Ghost had a third issue, and he drew this cover. But it changed. The story changed a little bit. Like, it was still the same character, but I think the sales had come in, the sales reports, and everyone was told to make it more superhero-y. So everyone's first two issues are very different. And so this third issue is just, it doesn't look that much different, but there are new characters that are introduced that are definitely, that lean more towards like superhero villain type of the month. Ernie would draw that. He drew one of these covers for this character. I forget his name. The Cougar or something. Catman. I mean, these are for the newsprint. This is pre-comic book store. And these are just so, like, what is going on? This is just like, who is this for? So he got a gig at DC. He got in through the door. I believe it was through Dick Giordano. And he got to draw the Legion of Superheroes and Batman as inked by Mike DiCarlo. So Mike DiCarlo, man, he's everywhere. Nice Jim Aparo type of Batman. But again, I'm not going to go through every single page of every single issue. I just want to get a flavor for it. So he drew a cool Legion of Superheroes. He drew some cool covers for these anthology titles. Just a great range of style and technique. He drew this Batman cover, which I'm very fond of. This Wonder Woman cover that I love as well. And this, here, let's see all of them. I want to see them all at the same time. It's great Green Lantern cover. I liked it when DC did this. I mentioned this in one of the Giffen episodes, but sometimes they would get a specific artist to draw the main marquee characters, and they would all get a shot at drawing these covers. And this is like a holy trifecta for me almost. It's great stuff. Green Lantern, it's interesting because he would later become an editor at DC, and he would edit Green Lantern. He didn't draw this, but this is something that I always found interesting. His run as an editor at DC Comics. Now, you used to get artists to be the editors, from Dick Giordano to Joe Orlando, Ross Andrew, eventually, Joe Kubert. Eventually, guys like Michael Golden would become editors. But you saw that mostly at DC. You don't see that anymore. That's like a dead art. What you have now, different types of editors, but you don't have even an art director, really. It's a different monster. So to me, it's super curious whenever there's an artist in charge of hiring people, of the direction of a certain book, the way they talk to their audience. And Ernie really seemed to give it an honest go at really trying to connect with his audience. You could tell in the letters pages, you could tell that he was listening to them. He would give them quotes and talk about his personal life and recommend books and movies and employed different cool people, to work on these comics. And so he had Green Lantern, he had Wonder Woman. He worked with Alex Toth. He got Alex Toth to do a Green Lantern story. How great is that? He worked on the Flash. He got Giffen to do some Flash. He worked for about a year as an editor. He was, let's see. He got Carmine Infantino to change his layouts, to get out of the grid form and start doing panels like this. That was an Ernie Colón mandate or suggestion. I'm sure he was nice about it, but I think mostly Carmine pages would look like this. And so even just doing this was very different for Carmine. and just kind of, he would help steer the artists in specific directions. And he started getting Dave Gibbons to do backups for the Creeper, which eventually was going to go to Giffen. It went to Chuck Patton. And then that's it. And then the job was over. Oh, he also did, he edited Blackhawk. But Blackhawk was very specific because he drew this cover for Blackhawk. Blackhawk had a rotating cast of editors, rotating chair of editors, mostly Marv Wolfman in the front. But the thing of it is, the writer Mark Evanier was the real editor. He's the one doing all the legwork for all this stuff and finalizing everything. So eventually he became the credited editor. Mark Evanier did. But for a stint, Ernie Colón was the quote unquote editor. I don't think he had much to say because this was a well-oiled machine. Dan Spiegel and Mark Evanier. This was the comic that, by their own admission, DC didn't even want to publish. They published this as a sort of in hopes to be in conjunction with the Steven Spielberg rumored Black Hawk movie. So they had to have something out on the stands. And I got to say, these are so amazing. I mean, Dan Spiegel is just one of the greatest cartoonists that ever graced the form. And he worked on Blackhawk for a couple years on these nicely written stories by Mark Evanier. Anyway, Ernie Colón, we're here to talk about him. He drew this cover. He edited some of the other stuff. But he also worked on this. Arak, Son of Thunder. He drew a bunch of these, but he was inked by mostly Tony DeZuniga, who's a very dominant inker. I mean, you really can't tell who the hell he's inking whenever he inks. But Ernie inked this cover, and it is one of my favorite Ernie Colón pieces. I mean, just the range and everything, just the mark making, the inking is it's so solid. It's so strong and diverse. Anyway, that's sort of what it normally looks like. See, Bob Smith is the inker, so it's a little bit more subdued. You could still tell it's Ernie. But that's just tops. That's the best. Oh my God. What? Look at that. I mean, Look at the line. Look how strong that is. Look at that strong figure making. I mean, that is inking. That to me is like, oh man, no fuss, bold, strong, direct. Look at the chiseled jaw. Look at that foreground inking, just really separating it from the background. It's not scared. It's not shy. This is some strong inking. This is, oh my God, through gritted teeth, I appreciate this. But then he could do this. He could do this sort of nice, delicate, well-balanced thing with a cool color hold background. He could do it all. And he came back for this issue, by the way. He left for a while, then he came back. He could mix it up. He could mix a good realistic face with some cartoonishness, and it works. It's not a mess. I think in an amateur's hands that it would be, it's looked down upon, but he manages to make it work and then some. It's just, oof, man. I like this. Good stuff. Remember those Steve Lightle covers? Ernie drew the insides. This was now when he was working with Keith Giffen doing the layouts. This is when Keith Giffen was pivoting strongly to being a layout artist, doing loose sketching and staging of panels and stuff. But before this, let me see if I have it here somewhere. He did a bunch of other stuff. He did this. He did Legionnaires 3. So this came before this. And this is really just Giffen. You could tell the Giffenisms here for sure. Like this sort of pacing. The grid is very conservative. You know, this sort of, it's not a stat panel, but it's just very consistent rhythm to this stuff. There's that classic Giffen Dutch. Yeah, you could tell the acting is all very Giffen, and Ernie is being very faithful to it. He's not deviating from whatever layout he was given, you know? I'm sure that was just weird to take. Anyway, we jumped ahead. Keep this in mind. This Legion stuff. This Legionnaires. We will be back to that. But he actually drew Legion. He drew Legion. He drew a backup. No, he drew the main story here. Ernie did. Again, just drawing buff, beautiful superheroes. He drew the backup here. He drew this one. That's a fun design. These are all fun layouts. He's just playing around now. Yeah, these aren't Giffen layouts at all. He's doing his own thing. Again, this is a huge cast. This is just a sprawling soap opera, and he took to it. This was around 84, 85. Before that, though, it's a little bit more Legion. But in this, there's an insert for Amethyst, and that is his major project in this time. Now, I want you to take a look at this, because it is the most he will draw his ass off for this character. I mean, it is intense. It is... What is going on here? This is just excellence. Every single panel, he is bringing it. He's bringing the heat. I mean, what? Look at these techniques to ink just a wall. Why does a wall look that good? I mean, this is a new book. This is, again, when DC was expanding their roster. I mentioned that in Blue Devil, in humor books, graphic novels. But this is just, if you got to get one Amethyst thing, you got to get it. By way of Legion of Superheroes 298. Again, don't take my word for it. Just look, use the eyeballs to look at this stuff. It's incredible work. I don't even know how he did that. Like some sort of etching or reverse printing, or it's really, really remarkable stuff. He never drew a Superman cover, but he drew Superman in DC Comics Presents. He was teaming up with Amethyst, basically his character. There's a big promo piece for Amethyst. Very ornate. More Amethyst, right? And now he doesn't draw this Amethyst, but he draws Blue Devil. So there you go. Everyone's just friends, you know, around the office. Amazing Heroes preview. Check this out. That's what I'm talking about. He was really going for it, man. He was like, that's the ad I was talking about. I don't want to touch it too much because this ink will rub off. Some rare, cool shots of pencil work. Ernie, man. Ernie was a beast. He's just a killer cartoonist. Killer. Anyway, let's look at some Amethyst for real. I got some in the back right there, but this is the debut issue. He's the guy. He's the guy. He's now drawing the hell out of this. He's in charge of this monthly comic book. This is his character. He co-created. He designed with the Blue Devil team. Dan Mishkin and Gary Kahn. They created this superhero sort of fantasy world. Oh, I mean, I don't feel like talking anymore. I just want to look at this stuff. Don't you? I mean, really. What else is there to say? Ernie Colón. The best. No, there's more to say. I mean, look at that. How many ways can I say, look at that, and cool, and great? Well, I'm going to try looking at these comics. I mean, these comics have, they're so, they're not under the radar. People know these comics. If you know your DC comics, you know. But these aren't reprinted that often. This maybe had a collection here and there. I believe it had a showcase collection. But this is thoroughly inventive stuff. I mean, it's definitely developing its own world within the DC universe. It is lightly connected. And there he is, kind of doing a domestic bit right there for balance. Yeah, I know he drew a bunch of man, it's so alive. Look at this. I know he drew a bunch of Who's Who profiles. Now these, George Perez started doing covers, but Ernie was inking them. And he somehow subdues George Perez. If you look at it, you could tell it's a George Perez. It's tons of glass. I think Ernie might have drawn half of that glass. But the way Ernie inked these faces and this figure, it's fantastic. Unmistakably him. Anyway, yeah, these are the covers by Perez. You know, now this was a 12-issue series. It was rebooted later on, or it came back. The Perez Cullins covers. And yeah, here we go. Amethyst. There we go. That's a nice Amethyst shot. Who do we have next? Malagigi. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but I do know that that's a fine piece of artwork. Who's next? Ah, there we go. Flaw and Child. That's from the second run of Amethyst. Balda from Arak. Great costume design. Oh, and by the way, Paris Cullins wasn't the only one to take over the cover chores for Who's Who. Ernie did. In fact, this was drawn for this issue. It was drawn by Jerry Ordway, or penciled by Jerry Ordway, and inked by Mike Macklin, maybe. But they didn't go with it. They got Ernie to do it. Interesting question. Character right there. That's a sort of a loose Ditko connection. And you also do this one. Now again, I'm not sure how these were framed in that. Are they on the same plane? Is it just kind of like chaotic, random floating bodies in the back? Whatever sells the book. That's usually the motto. Whatever's cool. And I guess for this cover, it's just a big Solomon Grundy. I guess that's a feature of his power. I'm not sure. Anyway, when Ernie was an editor, he edited himself on this. This was the final thing he edited. Now this was, I gotta say, this is such a cool book. It's so wonderful. It'll never be reprinted. It only came out in this edition. But in this self-contained, weird graphic novel, he wrote it, he penciled it, he inked it, and he colored it. He all but lettered it. Now it's interesting because there's color in the balloons, in the text balloons. But sometimes it's just the background color. So I don't know if that was a choice or a production flub. I still think it's pretty interesting looking. You know, this looks deliberate. This looks like this little halo effect looks deliberate. Do not let that stop you from enjoying this singular work. I mean, this is just through and through Ernie Colón. Writing the hell out of this weird sci-fi crime thing that's pretty violent, actually. He never took this property anywhere else. I don't know if he could have, but he did for DC. You know, the editing gig didn't last too long. I think he just got too wrapped up in the politicalness of it. You know, he never. I don't know. I don't know who he didn't get along with. He seemed to get along with everyone. So maybe he was just being nice, or no one ever had a bad thing to say about anyone. All I know is that, judging from what he said, there was too much politicking. And ultimately, it just didn't matter whether he talked to the readership of Green Lantern. You know, it's not like he directed that book into a top seller. He was just kind of going along with it. Anyway, this is a fantastic, weird book that it's cool that they just let this happen. You know, they were just trying everything. Again, different formats. Oh, this is a cool promo piece right here for this issue of Comics Interview. I believe they there's the interview. There's a picture of Ernie with his family. I'm very fond of the hate mail I get. A good editor is rare in this business. Shots fired. Recommended. Seek this out. Number 13, Comics Interview. Not only does it have a great interview with Ernie Colón, but all this just wonderful art, man. Just in black and white. Oh, good stuff. See, that's the Medusa chain that we just looked at, but just in black and white. What an odd thing. I mean, people, you know, things like, you know, Thriller and stuff like that. Those are just weirdo comics that were coming out from a huge corporation. How interesting is that? This is up there. This is up there with it. That's a nice promo piece. A very strong story that will create some controversy. Yeah, I believe it. I mean, if you read it, I don't know what the promotional push was. I didn't come across it until many years later. I never saw it in comic stores as a child. It's one of those expensive graphic novels. So anyway, he came back for Amethyst. He wasn't the regular artist, but he did come back for a tiny bit. He drew these covers. He drew this interior featuring Dr. Fate based on Keith Giffen layouts. Nice stuff, you know. This is really nice stuff. One more Amethyst thing. Oh, and that one issue of Legion, he drew the cover for the reprint. I can't seem to find it anymore, but this is just a fine piece on its own. It's because he drew the inside. Let's look at the inside real quick. We didn't really flip through it too much, but solid printing. Paris Cullins in color. We saw that house ad earlier in black and white. Beautiful stuff. What a nice cover too. Just an elegant, sort of quiet mood piece. And he draws a fine baby. He draws a great baby, actually. Look at that. Not many people draw good babies or children. You know this. I know this. It's everyone's weakness, it seems like. But now Ernie could draw anything. Look at this. Mindy Newell. She's a great writer. She wrote the Lewis Lane two-parter that Gray Morrow wrote. She started writing the relaunch of American Flag. That didn't work out. I don't know what the story there is, but she wrote these issues. And again, this is a Giffen layout. Oh, man. And so it's very much, yeah, that looks like a Giffen staging. It's a very, very Giffen splash. And Ernie's pretty faithful to it. I bet he's just really following it to a T. Yeah, so that's his work on the Legion. But then, as promised, we will look at this Cosmic Boy stuff, which you kind of flipped through a little bit before. But again, it's full of Giffenisms. Great Steve Lightle covers. But, you know, he's doing like domestic superhero scenes, time imbalance scenes, powers, villains, just super heroics like that. The rare vertical panel Rare for him, but Giffen, early on used to do that a bunch. But you'll know this if you watch the first episode of the Giffen series. We didn't look at this because we just looked at the Giffen drawn stuff, but the layouts, that's a whole different career altogether. I mean, but anyway, my point is that in showing this is that Ernie Colón was a team player as well. He could definitely control the product completely, but he was also, he was a collaborator. He was a good listener, essentially. That's what a collaborator is. You execute. We also took a look at this, Heroes Against Hunger, and this has everybody. But it also has Ernie Colón. Somewhere in here, you got Gray Morrow, Bernie Wrightson. I knew I saw him somewhere here. Walt Simonson. There you go. There we go. So you don't really see him draw Superman or Batman much. I think that's just interesting to note. Him drawing them a handful of times. Ink by Terry Austin. That's another team that you never really see. More superhero stuff when it comes to the Green Lantern. He just drew this quick origin. Not bad. Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner type stuff. But really check this out. Around this time, he was doing Underworld. He was teaming up with another Giffen collaborator, the writer Robert Lauren Fleming. And this is a cop story. This is every issue is sort of self-contained. I'd say self-contained. It's all, there is one story, but you could really just enjoy these on their own. These characters haven't been used since. I mean, it's just a civilian cop story. Again, pretty interesting for DC to be putting this out alongside Watchmen, Wasteland. There you go. See, it's just, they're pumping this stuff out. And I would see these ads as a kid, and I would never find these comics until way later. Because I had to find out. Those ads did a number on me. I had to figure out what the hell this was. I mean, that was the ad, basically. And talk about a compelling graphic. I mean, geez. Great photo reference. Nicely inked. It makes sense. It's a landmark. But again, this is the ad I was talking about earlier. The Forever People. See, this is just Paris Cullins. It's all full circle, my friends. Giffen is not doing layouts on this. This is pure Colón, but there are Giffen. That's a very Giffen. That's like straight out of Ambush Bug almost. This kind of density. Cool stuff. I miss these characters. I like this story. Again, never been collected. It's just one of those things. But it lives out in the world. They also collaborated on Matt Champion, which is a black and white, obviously. Not done in one story. This was supposed to continue. But it fell through. Next issue won't exist. It just fell through. And Ernie talks about it here. He's nonplussed about the whole situation. It was a shady situation. Shady and unfortunate. Great interview, though. All of his interviews are great. Yeah, all of his interviews are so good. He hates this picture, by the way. He's noted that this picture, he looks like he's choking. But I think it's super cool. Just a sharp looking dude. Very cool. See, this was the cover to the upcoming comic that never went anywhere. It fell through. It's unfortunate. Anyway, I suggest you seek this out because it's tons of more cool artwork. It's so great. But we're out of DC and we're now at Marvel. He's now doing a graphic novel. He's now doing a whole graphic novel. Again, Tom DeFalco, just let it go. Sid Jacobson was the editor. I believe he worked with him before on the Harvey stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Again, he colors himself here too. Yeah, he does it all. He does it all. In what looks to be color pencils. Look at that. You never, ever, ever see that. Not back then. I believe this was treated like a painted comic where you had to shoot it with a camera from a different layer. I don't believe he was coloring on the originals. This might have been done as an overlay, but it's very European. It's got that kind of warm feel to it. It's very rich, and it's a done in one story. Again, this character, it's a cool little story, self-contained, and yeah, it just exists here. You know, this wasn't like part of the MCU. Same way Medusa Chain wasn't part of the DCU. These are just comics that exist on their own merit. They don't exist because of some connection to another comic book. It's truly an original graphic novel. They both were. Now, he also did stuff for Airboy, real quick. He drew the interiors, but he also he colored these covers. He drew and colored these covers, really just showing off like his expert use of just negative space and shadowing and reflection and texture. Like this is just a straight up, he inked this and then colored it with just a color background. But this is just basically a painting. In the interiors, he's just the artist. Not just the artist, but you know what I mean? Like he's not doing the color and he's not writing it. But he's drawing the hell out of this. These are like the last. It's the countdown to issue 50. Written by Chuck Dixon. Hunt these down. They're by Eclipse Comics in the late 80s. Good looking stuff. Well researched. Heavily researched. You can't make this stuff up. This isn't like Legion of Superheroes. You could just make up a spaceship and a building with 2 strokes of a brush. You actually have to look at what kind of guns you're drawing here. And then here's the big one for me. You probably know what I'm going to say, given the chronology. It's Damage Control. Come on. Damage Control is amazing. This is like the Ernie Colón, Dwayne McDuffie masterpiece in the Marvel Universe. This is deeply connected to the Marvel Universe, unlike Axe. And it's a very sharply written, funny romp of a comic that continuity nerds hated. Not only currently, you know, continuity-minded fans, but editorial. Apparently editorial thought that they were going too far. They were making fun of the sacred cows. They didn't get it. In the same way, really, that people were a little pissed at the Giffen funny Justice League, you know. You could tell in other books they would just be these side jabs of, you know, making fun of the Justice League and how how they're just a bunch of goofballs, and you know, it's really just like aimed at Giffen and DeMatteis, and it's disheartening to see adults react this way, especially in a professional setting. You would think a professional setting. Anyway, these Damage Control books kind of elicited the same reaction. And they're dynamite, man. I mean, they look good. They're solid. Nothing too wild or experimental layout-wise. And it doesn't need it. It doesn't need it. It just flows so perfectly. I mean, I'm just compelled to read it right here. But I will spare you that and just show you just a quick flip-through of Ernie drawing the Marvel characters. That's great. I mean, who's going to complain about a smiling Iron Man? You know what I mean? If that's the biggest issue you have in this world, congratulations. I wish I was you. X-Men. He gets to draw X-Men. Who doesn't want that? You know what I mean? Draws a funny Wolverine. He draws a manly Wolverine. Wolverine who's lived. I guess that Wolverine's lived too. I like that Wolverine too. But yeah, it's just X-Men. I remember buying this. This is when I discovered Damage Control off the stands. It's when I got into Marvel Comics. It's through the Acts of Vengeance storyline. And I had no idea what it was. Didn't care. I thought it was funny. I thought it looked good. I wasn't scared off by the quote unquote talking heads or the romance. I thought it was great. I was moved to buy the other issues that came out. Come on, he's drawing the Punisher in one of the most hilarious Punisher takes ever. And still in character. These aren't like what the spoofs or anything. There's a difference between being goofy and being like ambush bug-esque, breaking the fourth wall and all that. This is just funny. This has a sense of humor about it. Dwayne McDuffie knew what he was doing. And Dwayne McDuffie, when he would draw a more like straight up just superhero comic, he would reel it back in. He wouldn't go overboard. He loves this stuff. He loved this stuff. And so for Damage Control, this was his chance to actually show some personality, show him, I don't know, writing some really sharp stuff. That's the panel right there. Oh man. It's just, oh man, just pause this and read this, would you? You get the whole thing. They're available. These are cheap comics. These were printed by the metric butt ton. I'm trying to keep a clean podcast here, guys. It is the last episode, though. This is it. After this, I'm not looking at any more artwork ever. And what a way to go out with a huge Thor bicep. I mean, look at that arm. Look at that staging. Great quick recap for those who have a short memory, which was me as a kid and all of us as adults now in the modern world. This is fucking so good. I can't tell you how good this is. I mean, I can, and I have been. There's a third volume I can't seem to find. Cal Baker drew the first issue, and then Ernie took the Cal Baker style and drew the rest of the series in that style. Well worth hunting down as well. Anyway, after Marvel, he went to Valiant. He worked at Valiant under Jim Shooter and drew a bunch of Magnus Robot Fighter. What's interesting about this stuff is that he colored it himself as well. Now, this was printed on newsprint. As you could see, it's not too glary, but unfortunately, the color is a little muddled in places. Not so much here, but check it out. What you can tell is that it's so good. I don't know if it's paint mixed with charcoal and color pencil. It does look multimedia. Not multimedia, you know what I mean. Look at this. Oh. Standard grid, as Valiant was known for. That's what Jim Shooter demanded. That you don't break formation. These comics look really good. I tried reading them, but I mean, with art like this, you don't really need to read them because Ernie's just such a good storyteller. See, this is really dark. Really dark. However, in the next issue, it looks pretty bright. This is really sharp stuff. Look at this, hand-colored. Look at the texture on that. You must have been coloring this on watercolor paper or something. Really beautiful, rich stuff. I mean, oh. He still got it. What is this, 91, 92? So he'd already been at DC. He was an editor. He did a couple graphic novels. He worked with Giffen. And now this is just the gig. This is the gig. No more Marvel, no more DC. I mean, maybe a little bit here and there, but really, he's a Valiant dude now. He worked here for a while. Is that Frank Miller cover, that Walt Simon's cover. But inside, you will find hand-colored Ernie Colón. Great stuff. Written by Roger Stern at this point. Jim Shooter was out. But yeah, good stuff. He did draw this Doom 2099, issue 9. He penciled and inked it. Just kind of a random thing. He also wrote it, by the way. Look at this nice color hold. Just, again, Joey Cavalieri, cool editor. Great writer of those Green Arrow backups with Paris Cullins. But he was a cool editor. He led a bunch of interesting projects. And he could play that superhero game too. Like he knew what was required of those books. I mean, this is interesting production value right here. And this is just a one-issue thing. You won't find this anywhere else. Has this been collected? I don't know. Is this available online? I bet you it is. We go from Marvel to Ultraman. We go to, let's see, reunited with Dwayne McDuffie. And this is like licensed material. This is, I mean, I guess in a way it all is, isn't it? But this is just sort of like, all right, the owner of Ultraman wants a comic book out. They assembled a team. They got these creators to do their stuff. And they got the great Ken Stacy to paint covers. And, it's fine work. It just goes to show that just these licensed properties have been going on since forever. I mean, Bob Hope had comics in the 60s. Godzilla had comics in the 70s. 80s had tons of them. It's nothing new. It just feels like there's a lot of that going on recently, but that's always been the case. And so, if this is the gig, this is the gig. And for Ernie, he was drawing just a handful of issues of this stuff. But now it's with Larry Yakata. Now, I'm unfamiliar with that writer, but now Alfredo Alcala is inking him. It still looks like Ernie. But at least that's all Ernie. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice double pinup. And here you go. More Ken Stacy, more Ultraman. And this is the last issue that he will be drawing because he's moving over to Dreadstar. You remember Dreadstar, right? The Jim Starlin not self-published, but it was a creator-owned book at first, and then it went to... No, it started as Epic, at Epic/Marvel, and then went to First. And then now it ended up at Bravura, which is a subdivision of Malibu Comics, the company that helped kickstart Image Comics. They did Ultraverse, and then they did Bravura, and this was part of their lineup. Peter David was writing this Jim Starlin property, and Ernie Colón was tapped to draw it and sometimes paint it. And hand color it, hand paint it. I mean, this is charcoal. Looks like mostly charcoal. But already we know that he could do it all. He could paint anything. He could color pencil, ink, write. Some nice pinups. This is sort of like a promo piece, a half issue. Now, I don't believe this was collected, but this, you could find these in the bins. These are well worth the hunt. If you're a Peter David fan, you will get a complete Peter David story. That's funny and intense, but well-rounded stuff. But really, this Ernie Colón stuff really sings. And this is the daughter of Dreadstar, the main character from the 80s. Now she's grown up and she's leading the rebels, if I remember correctly. But again, wonderful art by Ernie. a switch from the hand coloring to digital. This is just full on 90s digitalness. But yeah, this line of books, you know it had Walt Simonson's Star Slammers, Power and Glory by Chaykin, both great comics. And this is it. This is it for Ernie and sort of mainstream-esque comics. For a minute, at least. I mean, this is 6 issues. Yeah, you'll get your money's worth. This is great cartooning. Cool story. But he at least got to flex a little hand coloring on the cover, so that's nice. Reunited with Dad. Great stuff. Now, I got to show you this. He did this Omni Comics thing, right? And this is a magazine, but there's a comics section. And he drew some of the illustrations and some of these text pieces in which he hand colored, he inked, he did everything like this. Let me try to get the glare out, but you could kind of see it. It's inspired stuff. It looks really nice. It looks like he doesn't have the grind of a monthly deadline to sort of stifle him. Not that it ever did. He always delivered solid work and sometimes exceptional, mostly exceptional work, I think. But in terms of like handling all the art chores is what I'm saying. Because it takes time. Inking your own stuff takes way longer, and coloring your own work even more so. I mean, this is fantastic stuff. Risque. It's not quite adult. However, this is, let me try to cover it because even the cover is a little nuts. But if you know about Ernie Colón's Strip Search, let me try to, there we go. Yes. This is published by Eros Comics, a subdivision of Fantagraphics. And Ernie was out of comics at this point, and I believe, as he tells it in this book, which is out of print and difficult to find, but I remember when this came out, I mean, it was mind-blowing that he even did this, but he was a security guard, and he would do sketches at night to not get bored, and these sketches were pretty demented, and they turned into a story, and then I believe Kim Thompson hit him up for just to see if he wanted to print anything with Fantagraphics. Or Eros Comics, which was their adult line of books. And Ernie came up with this stuff. And every page, I wish I could show you, but every single page, even the interior front cover, is just it's adult material. It's not fit to show the public, but seek it out. It's well drawn. He still got it. It's funny at times. It's largely a comedic take. It's not supposed to be like sexy time or anything, but it is. It is adult though in that regard. And then around this time, this came out in 2002, but I had spoken to him. I actually spoke to him around this time, around 2001, on the phone through a friend who knew him, and I was an aspiring cartoonist. So I knew his work. I loved his work. I wanted some advice on how to break in and what I could do to improve, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was surprised to discover that he, at that time, was a real estate agent. He was working in real estate. And I thought, oh, once you do comics, you just do comics forever. And that wasn't the case. So that was really eye-opening. Anyway, that's when this came out. This Last Kiss, #3, has a pretty great, obscure interview with him. And none of these interviews repeat themselves, by the way. He always has something new and fresh to say. And I would suggest reading the Comics Journal 285 from 2007. That goes really deep, and it's fantastic. But for this right here, it's 2001. I had just met him through the phone, and he was super nice. I never met him face to face, but he was super gracious. He gave me tons of advice. And again, I don't know I couldn't wrap my head around this cartooning business, because to me, guys like Giffen were lifers, Paris Cullins, Steve Lightle, they seem to always be working. And so that's what I thought life was. So to hear Ernie not do that was strange, but good. It was good to know that there was life beyond comics, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Now, he did the 9/11 report in 2004, I believe. That was the graphic novel that brought him back into comics, and he started doing a couple more graphic novels, but it got him back in the limelight in terms of the cartooning world, not just Marvel and DC, but he started getting that interview at the Comics Journal, and there was a sort of a reawakening of interest in his work. And so, again, this is sort of like a reason why I like talking about this stuff, just to sort of get those names out there, to sort of examine it for my own sake, but also just to spread this work, just to put it under the microscope and enjoy it and obsess over it and study it and learn something from it. And it's, I don't know, it's been super fun. Now, again, I did this for Keith Giffen, 6 episodes. This is the bonus triple episode, 3-in-1. It's massive. I don't know how long it's run. I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again, to be honest. And that's why I really just wanted to focus on these 3 artists who I've wanted to talk about for a very long time, coupled with the massive Giffen retrospective. That's a good chunk of study and examination. I love this stuff. I've barely touched upon each respective creator's body of work. They have so many comics. I only have what I have, and I look forward to keep expanding that collection. You know, every time I see their names, instant buy. You know, I'm always on the hunt for this stuff, so I'm not burnt out on studying this stuff. I'm a student of this stuff. I love it forever. So it's been a real treat to get to talk about this stuff again with you. And thanks again for being here. I appreciate it. My name is Michel Fiffe, and this has been the Fiffe Files.